Good morning, students. Of course, I'm Tony Wilbon, the Dean of the School of Business, and we want to welcome you to this fantastic program. We are welcoming a visitor from the Kauffman Foundation, Mr. Philip Gaskin, Vice President of Entrepreneurship, and we think this is going to be an important session for you all to learn about starting your own business. As you all know, we've been kind of infusing entrepreneurship throughout the curriculum for at least the last few years. We have a lot of exciting news that's come to us in the last few weeks about entrepreneurship. And what Mr. Gaskin is going to share with you is how to understand risk management, financial management, and his journey to Kauffman and the important work that they do around entrepreneurship and supporting entrepreneurs to create their own businesses and be successful in doing so. So I'm going to encourage you to pay attention, take the nuggets of his wisdom back with you, try to understand how that could be helpful in you starting your own journey and your own ventures, and really take in what he has to offer, because I think it's going to be something very special and important to you. So with this, I'll turn it over to Dr. Ferguson, who's the Assistant Dean of Impact Engagement in the School of Business, who's going to do the session. Thank you all.
Good morning. How many of you have ever thought about, maybe when I grow up, I'm going to be an entrepreneur? Maybe thought about owning your own business. So that actually is something that makes Howard students very special. We often have aspirations of being our own business leader. So you're going to get a lot from today's conversation. We have the honor of having Mr. Philip Gaskin here with us from the Kauffman Foundation. And so Philip Gaskin is the Vice President of Entrepreneurship of the Yuvay Meyers Kauffman Foundation, where he's responsible for leading the foundation's comprehensive entrepreneur portfolio, including grant making, operating programs, convening research, and policy. Gaskin is charged with leading the team of more than 30 associates and providing vision, strategic thinking, and thought leadership to scale and deepen the impact of the foundation's entrepreneurship strategy. As a leader with deep expertise in developing diverse entrepreneurial ecosystems, Gaskin oversees the foundation's national strategy focused on eliminating systemic barriers to entrepreneurship and enhancing economic activity through inclusive entrepreneurship. With deep experience in organizational management in the variety of organizational settings, Gaskin is responsible as Vice President for the strategic planning, programming execution, grant process, budgeting, and operations of the entrepreneurship division at the foundation. So prior to joining the Kauffman Foundation, Gaskin was Chief Operating Officer for Impact Hub in the U.S., where he, sounds like my mic may have gone out a little bit. Be back, okay. Where he led organizational-wide initiatives to develop and scale social innovation marketplace to support entrepreneurs and impact investors to build sustainable businesses that drive long-term social and environmental change. He served as lead partner to Impact Hub's Global Association to promote interorganizational alignment, shape global business strategy, and advance strategic development efforts in developing regions in the world, including Africa and Latin America. Previously, Gaskin served in positions including Cory Booker for U.S. Senate and President Barack Obama, directing efforts in Pennsylvania for America. In these roles, he built and scaled grassroots ecosystems of volunteers who delivered historic results, aligning community, city, and state leaders to support policy initiatives. Prior, Gaskin held private sector executive leadership roles with BCD Group and Rosenbluth International, leading global firms providing travel management and strategic consulting to Fortune 500 companies. At BCD, Gaskin served as Senior Vice President for Global Business Strategy and Solutions, where he led global operations, customer strategy, account and contract management, technology, finance, and business development for a 400-person unit representing $1 billion in revenue. Gaskin led the industry's first global service marketplace, an automated platform providing real-time service to corporate travelers in over 30 countries. A native of Los Angeles with ties to Kansas City and Philadelphia, Gaskin attended Pennsylvania State University and graduated from California State University with a Bachelor of Science in Marketing. So, what an extensive background, and again, like I said, we have an honor of really getting these jewels. So make sure you're taking notes so that we can all advance our desires to become entrepreneurs. So I'd love to hear a little bit about your career path, and thank you so much for joining us today. What was your journey like?
Well, thank you. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My journey wasn't a usual one, and I'm going to tell a bit of a personal story about my dad and myself. I was 34 years old when I heard a word that really changed my life. So it was at a celebration of life ceremony for my father. And a man came up to me and said, your dad was a really good man. And he's also a really good entrepreneur. Now, in my 34 years at that time, I'd not heard that word, and here's what I did know about my dad at that time. I knew he was a dark-skinned black man who was from North Carolina and lived there during Jim Crow. I knew he moved to Los Angeles because it was seen as a haven, a opportunity for black men. I knew he wanted to play in a Negro League, but he got hurt. I knew he worked maintenance in offices and stores. And I knew by the time he was 40 years old, he opened up one store, and then he opened up another convenience store. But I never knew he was an entrepreneur. I didn't even know what the word meant. So you go, okay, so how can that be? How can one grow up in America, go to college, all those different things, and not know the word entrepreneur until he's 34 years old? And so the answer to that is the key to unlocking millions, if not billions of dollars in assets for entrepreneurs across the United States. And because I believe that the next great asset class, as I call it, is hiding in plain sight. And that's from folks that don't have opportunity or aren't being seen as being viable. So let me go back to my dad here. So, and where I grew up. So I grew up in Los Angeles, and there's this long street that divided neighborhoods. If you lived on the north side of that street, that's where, more families with money and those people had, famous parents or whatever. All people knew what entrepreneurs were. But if you lived on the south side, just one block away from that street, experience was different, right? The houses weren't as big, the grass wasn't as green, the opportunity wasn't as bright. The ambulances didn't get there as fast. The police got there much faster. And so being that one block away, that one zip code away, because that street was a dividing line zip code, literally changed my life. Because everything about that dividing line led to finance, led to a whole bunch of different things. So if I look at my dad and I, he used to pick me up from school a lot, and I remember starting in the 5th grade. And he and I would go a lot of places together, but one of the places we would go to a lot was a bank. And sometimes we'd go to the same bank. So finally one day I said to him, why do we go to so many banks? And he said, I'll tell you when you get older. Turns out, the reason why he kept going to so many banks, because he was trying to get that first loan for a business. And it was an idea that he had to bring to reality, but it took him 4 years to get that loan. Of being told time and time and again, sorry, your credit score is too low. Sorry, it was because of the zip code. It was because of the color of his skin. He didn't know, we didn't know back then, that redlining, that banks literally drew lines and are still today drawing lines down a map of where they're going to lend and where they're not. And and he wasn't the only one that had these barriers. I mean, in school, I thought I was a good student, took classes, got in some honors classes. I thought I did really, really well. And I'll never forget the day in high school where I said to my counselor, I want to go to an Ivy League school. I want to apply to Ivy League school. And he looked at me and said, "You? You're not Ivy League material." So I never applied. So when people are hearing, if you're one zip code away, if you're one block away, whatever, or just hearing you're not enough and unworthy, that is keeping too many people from risking and keeping too many people from doing a number of great things. So I am, I want the opportunity for many people to be able to innovate like my dad. And because it's that sense of one block over, sometimes it's one train track over, one rural county over, it's one zip code over. Too many people are being left out. So it was one last thing I'll just say on this. When I heard that from my counselor, one thing I did, a few years later, I started getting my first job. I think I was using my tips as a busboy or whatever I was doing. And I said, I had heard about this thing called Harvard Business Review. So I used my tip money and subscribed. And I will never forget that day because Harvard Business Review, you see it today, it's heavy. That I was in the house and I heard this thump, because we had one of those mailboxes that, put it through and it boom, thumps down. And I ran and looked, what's that thump? And I saw it, Harvard Business Review, and I remember I started crying. Because the word Harvard was in my house. I never thought it would be there. And whether it's Harvard or Howard, right? It's really important for people to have access and to know that they belong. So my journey, and thank you for that question, my journey is one of, it's an interesting path, but what gets me up every morning in doing this work is making sure that no entrepreneur has to go through what my dad went through.
Wow, that's really impactful. And so as we talk about the past, let's bring it to the present.
Mm-hmm.
So what does the state of entrepreneurship look like today,
Yeah.
and how has the pandemic affected that?
Well, if you look back in the last 40 years, entrepreneurship has been fairly stagnant, just stagnant across, hasn't it? And that's been a problem. We know that, a good amount of net jobs in the United States are created by firms that are less than 5 years old, which is meaning that obviously, what does that mean? We need more of those firms, younger firms starting up, businesses starting, because the larger firms aren't able to carry that all on their own. But demographically, we know that those hardest hit in starting businesses are black people, other people of color, women, people in rural environments. The numbers are just start showing that. So that was before COVID. So I say to folks, because of COVID, I say, well, hold on a second. Before COVID got here, we had this issue. COVID just made it a lot worse. Mm-hmm. Now, promising. Last year, so the most number of business starts, business applications, in 25 years. So that's a positive sign.
Absolutely.
Now, many of those are out of necessity, people just having to start. But some necessity is not a bad thing. If we look at the last Great Recession, we had companies, Dropbox and Uber and other things, Zoom and Moderna, who's helping with the vaccine, all were started back then, right? So some things can come out of necessity. So the opportunity to jump in, may be better now than it was before, but there's just too many barriers, and we can go into that.
Well, so do you think that this is a good time to consider entrepreneurship?
Well, I think let's remember our entrepreneurial spirit that we all carry, that we have, and many, many that are watching this. It's always a good time to be an entrepreneur. It's always a good time to want to take risks. It's always a good time to have a great idea. That's what our country was founded on, and our backbone of the country is entrepreneurship and the small business spirit, always. So I will always say that.
It's always
my excitement in entrepreneurship. It's about, what are the conversations to have about how to do it.
Right.
And all those things, right?
Right. And so how can the young adults in this class and students that are listening really take advantage of this opportunity and turn their business ideas into, something that it provides a livelihood? Like, what are the first steps?
First step, networks. As a former community organizer, you heard some of that on my bio. A lot of that was community organizing and movement building in communities. And the first thing that you do is find a network and you talk to people. You start small, be patient, start small. There are the one or two people that might want to hear your idea, they have an idea, and start your network. And hearing from them and hearing back, because you're immediately supporting each other. You're coming up with ideas. So networks are really important. Your networks on campus, networks you might have off campus. And an example of that we've done for entrepreneurs actually started in our cafeteria in our headquarters in Kansas City. It's about 9 years ago. So we're hearing from entrepreneurs all across Kansas City. Well, who else can I talk to? Can you connect me to somebody? And we finally realized that, okay, we're hearing this a lot. Why don't we hold a convening and have them all come together? And we did that, and then we kept doing that. And it's become a program which we call 1 million cups. And it's called that because it's 1 million cups of coffee being consumed by folks coming together. But every Wednesday morning, in over 130 communities across the United States, there is a 1 million cups. It's 9 a.m. every Wednesday morning in local time. And what happens is 2 entrepreneurs get up in front of a group of those that support them. People from the community, could be investors, educators, community development folks, anyone interested in, accountants, whatever, anyone interested in supporting entrepreneurs. And the entrepreneur is not a pitch session, but the entrepreneurs simply tell their story of where they are in their business and the help that they need. And what grew out of that cafeteria is now in 135 locations across the United States. And I say that because it started with just asking questions of who can I connect with, and sometimes it can feel a little daunting, but just start talking. Just start talking.
Okay.
That's first easiest step.
Good advice. I'm going to be taking notes on that. How do you know that you have a good idea and that it has long-term potential? Like, how do you really think out your idea so that it's scalable?
Yeah, and one thing I'll also mention as well to that, another program we have, a Kauffman Fast Track, FASTTRAC, one of our longest standing programs. And it's facilitated learning, so classroom learning on how to grow a business. And we also have an online self-paced version of that as well. So certainly look into that. But it leads into, so the question about what are the other, what was the other steps?
Just how do you make it come to life? Like, how do you know that you have a good idea?
Yeah. Well, again, there's the talking, and then there's just planning out. So here's what I always say. Who's going to buy the product? Whatever it is that you want to start, who's going to come into the restaurant to eat the food? Who's going to buy the product of what you're doing? So this is where the business mindset, the business planning comes in. So what's the market for this? Do I have a market for what I want to do? And that's one of the most important things that I've seen entrepreneurs make that mistake at times, because you're in passion, right? Entrepreneurs, you got to be passionate. You're excited. You got an idea, and sometimes you can skip that step of, oh, well, maybe this is really exciting to me. It may not be for anybody else, and that sounds really simple, but it's an important step. And then, what are the other things I might need to learn in order to answer that question? So how do I know if someone's going to buy it? Who do I need to talk to? Again, it goes back to those groups and support. So that is certainly one of getting to knowing about the viability of that product or that service or the idea. And I would say in that is, it's okay if your idea is to start a business and then employ 1 or 2 people, or even if you don't want to employ people. The notion that you've got to be that entrepreneur that's from Silicon Valley or from somewhere else, Don't let that deter you. You know? And the third I'd say is, if you have any fear, that's fine. Embrace it and just turn it right back into the passion. Because the fear will sit there, oh, what if I fail? Entrepreneurs, if you're going to fail, try it, fail fast, start again. That's fine. Our founder, Yuvay Meyers Kauffman, always say that. Even at Kauffman, once a year, we have what's called a Fail Fest, where we come together at the end of the year and we are talking about what didn't we do all that right this year, and how do we make it better for next year?
Sounds cool. So how do you go and get capital? I know that many of us have great ideas, right?
Yeah.
Like ideas of things that could work, but then the next step is, so how do I get the money?
Yeah, I know, yeah. And capital, I mentioned barriers, right? So capital is certainly one of those barriers that get in the way of entrepreneurs starting and growing businesses. You know, and again, the crosstabs of Black people, people of color, women, you know, having a harder time starting businesses, and capital can be one of those. And you know, if you don't have the friends and family capability, right? So anyone that can loan you the money or what have you, where do you start? And so there's a number of, and listen out, because there's a number of programs that are running through this small SBA, the Small Business Administration. We're in a moment of time now, and believe we've had some money that's come out to communities earlier this year, and there's going to be another round as the other bill passes. And just pay attention, look and pay attention. How's this money flowing? And then pay attention to the Small Business Administration website and others of just learning the type of programs that are going to be there. Talk to you have local banks or folks in your area. Talk to on campus. Have these conversations on campus too, to learn about. It's tough. I mean, I told the story of my dad, right? 4 years it took him to get a loan. And finally, it was a Black-owned bank that finally gave him the loan. But you know, our research shows that 83% of entrepreneurs do not access a bank loan or what's called venture capital at the time of starting a business. 83%. And that's because entrepreneurs don't normally have long-standing relationships with banks. And you might have good credit, but the credit history is not long enough. So you get, well, I'm sorry, your credit score is just 11 points too low, so you're not going to get the debt loan. Venture capital, most venture capital, goes to large metropolitan areas, 4 or 5 of those. And so if you're in the middle of the state, or if you don't have that really glitzy idea, whatever, you may not be getting that. So those challenges are out there, but you know, pay attention to this moment in time. I go back to this moment in time when there's a lot of capital flow happening to communities, and pay attention and read up and learn on those. We're trialing some things at Kauffman, and one of our areas in capital access in our entrepreneurship strategy, looking at, you know, what are those alternative, innovative ways of getting capital. So if so many people can't get the debt loan or the venture capital. And one of the initiatives we call our Capital Access Lab, so sort of a laboratory really, of testing out, you know, we've been able to work with 6 fund managers, one of which is here in Washington, D.C. by the name of 1863 Ventures. But these funds are looking at these innovative ways of getting capital to entrepreneurs that can't get the debt or can't get the venture capital. Things like, you'll hear a term, you can search this one, revenue-based investing, revenue-based financing, meaning that the entrepreneur doesn't have to necessarily pay back until their business starts making some revenues. So that's easier. It doesn't put so much stress on the entrepreneur at the beginning. So we're really in the work of creating, you know, looking at these, how do we get more capital flow creatively into the communities for entrepreneurs to start businesses. So more to come on that.
Can you elaborate a little bit more about the 83%? So the other 17%, do they have a better chance of surviving? So what does that mean for us?
Well, the other 17% might have, ability to, one, that other 17% is able to get the venture capital, is able to get the debt, and may have other forms or other avenues, friends and family, the rich aunt or uncle, or whatever it may be. In the second part of your question was.
And what?
Yeah.
So do they have a better chance of surviving?
Well, when you look at it, they might have more reserves, right? Or more, if they have the credit history or been able to have the relationships with banks or what have you, perhaps they can go back to the well more often and what have you. So there is an advantage that folks that aren't in 83% have.
Right.
And so again, it's why we're inspiring more traditional lenders to look at these models,
Right.
because one thing that the Capital Access Lab is proving out, that the funds and then the entrepreneurs that they're investing in are making money, are doing some really good things, and it's just proving out that we're all assets and can make money. So there is some favorability versus when you're not in that 83, right?
So we want to be in the 17% when we start our businesses.
Yeah.
So that's where the Kauffman Foundation
Kauffman
can come
looking at it's about a level playing field for everyone. This is like democratizing, use that word, capital access and opportunity for all. And in our, I invite you also to do a search for America's New Business Plan, which I believe this is in your handouts as well, but for those of you outside of the room, America's New Business Plan is a policy roadmap, a 4-point plan, bipartisan policy roadmap for policymakers to institute different types of policies, programs, and practices that can help entrepreneurs start businesses and grow businesses. And those 4 pillars, there's 4 pillars in the plan. So there's access to opportunity, access to funding, which we just talked about, access to knowledge, and access to support. And those are the 4 key areas that entrepreneurs need. Mm-hmm. And so it's, we say so much about what the entrepreneur can do. Can't put it all on the entrepreneur's shoulders. Entrepreneurs carry a lot. Mm-hmm. So getting a whole community out there, policymakers and economic developers and others, to help. It's a team sport. This is a team sport. We try to get everyone involved. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so why is this important to you, and why is this important to the Kauffman Foundation to try to get more of us in this 17%?
Yeah. Well, I'd say that, our founder, Yuvay Meyers Kauffman, he, we say he grew up poor and died a billionaire.
Wow.
And he said that everyone should have a fundamental right to education and economic opportunity, and that everyone should have it regardless of race, creed, color, geography. So that's in our DNA, is to do that. But if we look at just do the math, this is just pure economics. So we know that in years to come, half the population will be made of women and black people of color, right? Who are having some of the hardest times starting businesses to then employ people. Well, if that's the case, what happens in 10, 20 years when we don't have enough jobs created for people to be towards their own economic prosperity? And it's just a numbers game, an economic viability and sustainability of the United States economy. We need that. We have to have everyone. It's not about taking from one population and moving to the other. By having those that are having the hardest time succeed, everyone's going to succeed. So our passion points are around that, of opportunity and access and entrepreneurship for all. We know there are certain demographics that need some help, and it has to be there. But that's why, the why we do it. And if you look at it, the foundation and our 2 priorities, so we have prepared workforce. It's preparing a workforce to have the real world learning experiences and the skills and everything else to whether you want to be an employee or an employer, but a prepared workforce. And then entrepreneur-focused economic development. So that prepared workforce, as you're coming through school, K through 12 and moving through, and whether you want to go to college or not go to college, you're going to have the skills that you need to do what you need to do and then get it and then start that business or become that employer. And so it's that, that overarching belief in, as we said, our inclusive prosperity framework, like, economic mobility and prosperity.
Absolutely. One thing that I thought was interesting that you just said was bringing in the idea of K through 12, educating us. Obviously, the students in this room are privileged enough to be in college, but do you think that there is a need for this economic education about entrepreneurship to be taught younger and to be accessible to all?
Yeah, going back to my story as a kid, I wish I didn't have the language. I didn't have a wealth building language taught to me. I didn't have entrepreneurship. I didn't know what the word was. My dad didn't know he was an entrepreneur, I bet. Probably he never heard the word. So imagine if wealth creation, you were learning about that in class. Imagine if you're K through 12 and you go to art class or something, you start learning art. Imagine if we were teaching drawing things that relate to the language of wealth and wealth creation, so it just becomes part of us. So we do need that. And then to be able to have those valuable skills, because the coming out of high school today, and there's the diploma, but we want that diploma to mean much more than that. So in Kansas City, in our education work, in our real world learning initiative, we're working with over 30 school districts and charter schools to redesign, reimagine the K through 12 diploma, right? So that kids will be able to graduate with market value assets, certain skills that are marketable and get you into, and so there's like a business to education pipeline and then, or probably business to education to business connections, so that businesses can see you, employers can see you and say, okay, great, I see these accreditations that you have, and skills that you have, and bring into an employment. But and that's if you want to be an employee in an organization, remember, but again, if you want to start your own business, be able to have that, so that diploma is an on-ramp and a path over, more than it is today. So absolutely.
So what are some skills you think we can be teaching here, like in the business school?
Well, obviously, problem solving.
Okay.
Problem solving, sense making. They're sort of the two things that I think are so valuable. How to solve complex problems, how to make sense and connect things. Right? The world's complex. There's a lot of different variables out there, and we have to deal with them on different planes, in person, through technology and social media and online, all of these different types of things. But the ability to bring people along, to understand you, to bring different, especially, so if you're going out and pitching your business or whatever, how to make sure you're landing with them and bringing them along to understand, bring them in and bring them along to understand what you're asking for. Life isn't all about having friends and business partners that all think alike. Being able to master bringing people along from all different factions that may not agree with you is highly important. And so those are three. So problem solving, sense making, and the ability to just bring people along. And that's communication. I say this to entrepreneurs a lot, especially the tech entrepreneurs. They're doing tech. I said, your gift, your gold, your advantage is still going to be people skills. I don't care if it's a technology and it's through social media and you figure you never have to talk to them. You're going to differentiate yourself if you know relationship management and relationship building and the ability to communicate and bring people along. I guarantee you. That's a competitive advantage.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love hearing that. And all of our students in here have probably already taken a course called Business Problem Solving.
There you
We
go.
told you it was important. We told you it was important. So what does the future of entrepreneurship look like?
I think it's bright. It has to be. And it is. It's bright because of all of you here and all of you that are tuning in. It is what people in government and business are seeing is that we have these gaps, and they're understanding one thing we can all agree on is that small business and entrepreneurship is the backbone of communities, the backbone of this country, and then we have to circle back to that and support that. Hearing a lot of support, regardless of belief, on that. And so I believe it's bright. I believe it's time for the risk taking to be there, the good ideas to be there, and it's what gets me out of bed every morning. And I think there's awareness now. We talked about this before. There's awareness because of last year in COVID. There's an awareness. More people are aware of the gaps and the challenges than ever before. We're going to take advantage of that awareness, and have your ideas. Speak up. Be heard.
Well, I don't want to take up all the time because I want to make sure that our students in the audience, as well as those watching at home, are able to ask some questions. So I'm going to take a moment and see if there are any questions from the audience, if any students want to ask any questions. And while you guys are thinking of some questions, I'm going to go ahead and ask a couple more. I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity.
I got a couple thoughts.
Oh, please. Well, I'll definitely turn it over to you.
Search for entrepreneurship.org. And it's a resource as well. The basics about entrepreneurship and understanding entrepreneurship are there. That is a resource that we've been affiliated with. And so I mentioned Fast Track. I think what can, on the question about universities do, just any type of low cost or no cost programming for students in entrepreneurship, whatever that may be, either on campus or off, are just a couple other things that came to mind. So,
well, make sure you're writing that down. That's going to be a good resource for you. So what do you wish you would have known at 20 years old about entrepreneurship? The language that the kids on the other side of that street, that dividing line, that's sort of like that Berlin Wall, which is a street, but the Berlin Wall, had. And I wish my dad had it so he could have taught me. I don't regret the grittiness and the streetwise nature of learning and things that I just had to do on my own. Been working since I was 16 years old. You learn a lot from that. Don't ever think that not having all the assets and things you may need is that much of it. You will learn from everything, and it's been a path, but the learning and the experiences and actually learning some real world experiences and lessons and things by not having a certain path was just as valuable, and actually come in to help me on a daily basis in everything I do today. How can students share more about the language that you spoke about with the people around them? So many of us may not have come from homes where our parents are familiar with all of the theoretical pinnings of entrepreneurship, but there's always, again, in our community, there's this desire to own and do our own thing. It's very innate in who we are as a culture. So how can we impact our community with this language?
Well, I start with, I'm going back to community organizing and house parties, which we used to call them. invite, and parents can do this too. Invite 10 people over from down the block. I'm gonna have everyone sit in my living room, and we want to talk about starting businesses. You watch what comes out of that conversation, and the knowledge that comes out of that conversation, and the language that comes out of that conversation, and the lessons that come out of that conversation. So certainly starting there. And then the resources that I've given, and all throughout please go to Kauffman.org. All throughout our website, you can learn about the language and the research that we do on entrepreneurship, the policy work that we do, the capital work that we do, and just start learning about the barriers and the successes of entrepreneurs. Attending a 1 million cups, going onto our website and just looking at 1 million cups and learning about that. There's so many. That's why I mentioned entrepreneurship.org. Use the free resources right in front of you to learn the language and just see. And hold here on campus, conversations on campus, forums on campus. Do a pop-up here in the auditorium about it, and have speakers come in. A number of different speakers that we talked about that could come in and provide the language and the experiences as well. It's a big ecosystem of entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs, Black entrepreneurs, other people of color, women entrepreneurs here in Washington, D.C. that would love to come in, be part.
Would you all be interested in participating if there were entrepreneurship forums to help you get your ideas off the ground? That's pretty cool, okay?
Right.
That's good to know. So what has to happen first? The good idea and getting your business set up, or start thinking of your idea and taking it and try to get capital first?
I don't know if there's really a recipe for that, because you can have an idea in a dream at night and wake up and write it down. I had a great idea. Let those flow. Don't scripting ideas and those type of things. You just let that flow. Be free with that. I would say simultaneously, like I was saying, okay, there's an idea, and get curious about, how do I bring that to a reality? What are the steps I need to take in order to make that happen? Because there's a lot of instant gratification out there. I mean, we can go on anyone's Twitter page or whatever and see successful entrepreneur here, with no learning whatsoever about how you get there. So, so simultaneously, the idea and the learning, doing those at the same time is gold. That helpful?
Absolutely. I'm taking notes myself.
Okay.
I'm thinking about how to start businesses right now in my head. So I'm curious to know, so are you guys open to talking to each other? And I know you said you would be willing to hear from entrepreneurs, but one thing I hear from a lot of students is that you get a little gun shy, you get a little nervous about talking with each other. What can we do to make your network, because this is what Mr. Gaskin said, how can we help you guys to build a community, a network amongst yourselves? Anybody have any ideas? How can we help you guys to formulate ideas together about your businesses? I'll give you guys a moment to think about that.
And I'll go back to this: start small and have no pressure. Just get in a room and start talking. Don't even try to script it. Just say, here's what I'm thinking, and here's what I'm thinking, and just roll with it and see what it turns into.
Yeah.
That's because if we get in our heads too much, sometimes the heart and the gut's not coming into play, and you just want to just be, and just start talking and just watch it flow. That's what I would start with.
Absolutely.
And I would also say too, tap into your personal story and experience.
Mm-hmm.
There's gems and learning that come out of that, and that authenticity of saying, here's just where I'm at, what I've learned, what my passions are, but being true to yourself. And we say this to communities as well. When communities how do we become a better entrepreneurial community for entrepreneurs? How do we become more connected, and who's doing it better than we are?
Mm-hmm.
And how do we become the next Silicon Valley and all of these different types of things? But it starts with just being true to who are you and what are your values in your community? What do you stand for? What are your gifts? What's made you special in the past? And going from that, we can go from that in ourselves as well.
I have one more question about networking.
Okay.
So I know that it's often easier to network with your peers, but most of our peers may not have the capital. Do you think that there are tiers of networking? And how do you navigate when you're amongst your peers versus amongst people who you clearly need help from?
Here's where I'd use the university, right? So you start in your smaller groups and whatever, and you just say, okay, here are the questions that we just came up with. We need help with. We need to know more about capital. We need to know about this. The university can help find those people and bring them in, right? So use your gifts. I say, use your assets, use your gifts. Use the Howard University is a huge gift, right? There's so many alums
Absolutely.
that are dying to help, right? And so make those connections, and I'm happy to make those connections as well. Fantastic alumni base, obviously, and would they want to create the next leaders behind them, right? And those are you all, and so I would definitely start that. But start with your own ideas, and don't worry about trying to get it perfect or get it right. Don't let that get in. Don't let that get in the way.
Absolutely. Are there any final words that you'd like to leave us with?
Let's see. Maybe go back to maybe what I wish I would have known in my 20s. I go back to where you are. I wish I would have known my own power. I learned it over time. But when you have a high school counselor tell you you're not Ivy League material, when you watch your dad be rejected by so many banks and told he's not worthy, when all these things lead up, you get out of your own, we get out of our own power. Understand brilliance, understand gifts, understand we have DNA naturally in us that's entrepreneurial. And I say this to all entrepreneurs. If you have that entrepreneurial mindset, we have had the entrepreneurial mindset for years. If you have that entrepreneurial mindset and that growth mindset, that can get you a long way.
Absolutely.
And understanding your own power first. So,
Absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for tuning in. And those of you that are here in class with us, you guys will get the opportunity to come up and speak with Mr. Gaskin and ask the questions you didn't want to ask during the event. So thank you again.
You.
So appreciative. Let's give him a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Anytime, happy to come back to.